She got the part in the school play. She ran home to tell me, face flushed, eyes bright, the kind of joy that hasn't learned yet to make itself smaller. And the first thing I said was, "Don't get too excited. It might not go well." She was 9 years old, and I watched her face fall, and I felt relief. That is the thing I have never said out loud. I felt relief. My daughter is everything I was not allowed to be, confident in rooms that would have terrified me, chosen by people who never chose me, loved easily in the way some people are loved, like it costs nothing, like it is simply their right. I watched her become all of it, and I loved her, completely, genuinely. And underneath that love lived something I could not name for 30 years, something I am only now, at 67 years old, finally prepared to call by its real name. She never knew. That is the part that makes it worse. She spent her whole childhood wondering why her mother always had a but. You did well, but. That was wonderful, but. I'm proud of you, but. She thought I was a perfectionist. She thought I had high standards. She built her resilience around a mystery. That had a very simple answer. Her mother was jealous. Her mother looked at her daughter's freedom and grieved her own captivity and took it out on the one person who deserved it least. This is the hardest thing I have ever agreed to say out loud. Harder than anything. Because it makes me the villain of my own child's story. And I have spent 30 years believing I was the hero of it. Stay with me, because if any part of what I'm about to say sounds familiar to you, you need to hear the rest. I grew up in a house where women were decorative. That sounds dramatic said plainly like that. But it is the plainest way I know to say it. My mother was bright, genuinely bright, the kind of intelligence that fills a room without trying. My father found it inconvenient, so she made herself smaller, year by year, occasion by occasion. She made herself into something that fit the space she was allowed. And she raised me to do the same. Not deliberately. She was giving me what she believed was wisdom. She was teaching me to survive the world as she understood it. Don't shine too brightly. Don't want too visibly. Don't be too much for the room. I learned those lessons so completely that by the time I was 20, I had already decided the size of life I was allowed to have. And then I had Emma who had not received those lessons. Emma who arrived in the world already too much for every room, in the most magnificent way possible. She wanted things openly. She pursued things without apology. She failed at things and tried again without the shame that had always made my failures feel permanent. She was 8 years old and already freer than I had ever been. And I loved her for it. I genuinely loved her for it. And I resented her for it in equal measure. And the resentment had nowhere to go except sideways. It came out in small ways. Always small, never enough to be named. When she was excited, I introduced caution. When she was proud, I introduced perspective. When she succeeded, I praised her and then immediately raised the bar. Not cruelly, never cruelly. With the specific gentle devastation of a mother who always knew better. A mother who had seen how the world worked. A mother who was protecting her daughter from disappointment. That is what I told myself. For 30 years, that is what I told myself. The school play was the first time. but it was not the last. There was the art prize when she was 12. She won. First place. She called me from school and I said, "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." There was the university offer when she was 18. First choice. Full scholarship. I said, "Make sure it's really what you want." There was the promotion at 32. The one she had worked toward for 4 years. She called me crying happy tears, and I said, "Just make sure you're ready for the responsibility. Every single time. A but, a caution, a gentle puncturing of something that deserved to stay whole." She asked me once. She was 35. We were having lunch. She put her fork down and she looked at me and she said, "Mum, why do you always do that?" I said, "Do what?" She said, "Make it smaller. Every time something good happens to me, you make it smaller." I don't understand why. I looked at her across that table, and I had the answer. I had always had the answer. And I said, "I don't know what you mean." I watched her pick her fork back up. I watched her decide not to push it. I watched her file it away in the place where she kept all the other moments she couldn't explain. And I hated myself. Quietly. Completely. The way I had been hating myself for 30 years. I am telling you this now because she deserves to know the truth is not about her. It was never about her. It was never about her light being too much. Her light was exactly right. It was about me standing in it and feeling the shape of everything I had been told I couldn't have. Everything I had agreed not to want. Everything I had made myself small enough to stop reaching for. She was living the life I had been taught I wasn't allowed to live. And instead of letting that be purely a joy, I let it be a mirror. And mirrors show you things you are not always ready to see. I wrote her a letter last year. 12 pages. I told her everything I have told you. My mother, the lessons, the play, the fork at the lunch table, all of it. She called me the evening she read it. She didn't speak for a long time. And then she said, "Mum, I knew. I always knew something was there. I just didn't know what it was." She said, "Thank you for telling me." Not, "It's okay." Not, "I forgive you." Just, "Thank you for telling me." Which was more than I deserved, and exactly enough. Jealousy is the word we give to wanting what someone else has. But this was something more specific than that. This was grief. The grief of a woman watching her daughter live freely, in a world that had asked her to live small. That grief was real. It deserved acknowledgement. What it did not deserve was a child to absorb it. If you are a mother watching your daughter become something extraordinary, and you feel something complicated underneath the pride, name it. Not to her, to yourself first. Name it honestly, because unnamed things do not stay inside. They leak into every but, into every caution, into every small deflation of someone who deserved to be inflated. Name it. Give it somewhere to live that isn't her. She is not responsible for your unlived life. She is living her own, and she deserves to do it in full.